and gentlemen, let me please welcome you to the UNA USA Southern California Division 12th Annual West Coast Global Forum. The theme, as you all know, is refugees and migration, the global challenge and the local impact. Is this, am I speaking too loud? Okay, great. So welcome, whatever you had to go through, presidential traffic, etc., to be here. Thank you so much for being unreasonable and coming to downtown Los Angeles on this sunny, beautiful day. And I promise this will be a great event. And the reason it'll be a great event is because you're here. So I hope you get that. Thank you very much for being extraordinary and unreasonable. I want to first welcome some of our special guests that are here today and make a few opening comments, and then we'll take it from there. You don't need to be hearing from me. A lot of times when we go to events, you know, a speaker, an MC starts off with a joke, some kind of humorous story. I'm not going to really be doing that today. Hopefully you'll still have some laughter through the course of the day, but the topic isn't really a laughing matter. It's not a joke what's going on in the world of refugees and migration, so I felt it would be kind of weird to start off with a joke. So let me refrain from that. Before I welcome some of our special guests, I'll share a poem that I came across recently. The High Commissioner for Refugees in Canada, in conjunction with UNESCO Canada, had a poetry contest about the topic. And a young woman, Megan Pullman, 14-year-old from Walnut Grove Secondary School in Langley, British Columbia, wrote the following. It's titled Enclosure. I stand in a gathering of monstrosity, gazing through the silver cage to get a glimpse of the world beyond, the life that could be ours to live. Visitors come to see if the tales are true, to confirm their suspicions on what terrible beasts we are. Some of the group scurries off with their tails between their legs in fear of the new company. The thought of prancing over and greeting them crosses my mind, yet it's too late as the spectators turn away from our cage and leave. Mocking us, claiming how pathetic and unworthy we are, I glance down at my soiled clothing and my broken family and almost agree. So on that note, let me welcome our special guests. By the way, I'm Barry Simon. I'm the president of the UNA USA Southern California Division. The Southern California Division encompasses 12 chapters throughout Southern California, from Santa Barbara to San Diego, from Los Angeles and Hollywood to the Inland Empire and Coachella Valley, Pomona Valley, Whittier, San Fernando Valley, Orange County, Long Beach. So wherever you live, we have a chapter nearby. We have chapters all across the country, and I welcome your membership and your participation. The website is www.unausa.org for our national organization, and www.socal.org for the Southern California Division, which also lists all the chapters as well. As a point of information, by the way, for those of you who would like to log on, the wireless network here is TCE guest, and no password is required. Again, that's TCE guest. Okay. In basic alphabetical order, I'm going to introduce a few of the special guests that are with us today, and I would actually prefer to mention each and every one of your names, because in my opinion, each and every one of you is a special guest. So starting off alphabetically with the professor from Cal State University, Channel Islands, Mark Abramick. Thank you, Mark, for being here. From the Consulate of Qatar, the Honorable Awad Al-Habibi and Abdul Rahman Al-Sheeb. I don't know if they've arrived. Are they here? Great. Again, in somewhat alphabetical order, James Alva, Senior VP, Market Director for City Community Development. Also from City, Robert Annabelle, Managing Director and Global Markets Manager, City Community Development. Bob, thank you very much. From the Consulate of Mexico for Community Affairs, Adriana Arguez. Is Adriana, did she arrive yet? Great, great. Thank you, Adriana. We have several people, I won't name them all, from the American Association of University Women. Thank you all for your being here. If you want to just raise your hand if you're with AAUW. Great, thank you. Hale Bezadi, Managing Director and Global Markets Manager, Private Clients Division of Citi. Thank you, Hale. I'd like to welcome in particular a new chapter president, our newest newly recreated Los Angeles chapter president, Gillian Boardman. Gillian. From Citi, Lisa Deloney, Managing Director and Markets President, California and Nevada. Thank you. Chai Elder, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, Vice President for Southern California City Community Development. Great. Our friend Janet Elliott, Executive Director of the International Visitors Council of Los Angeles. Thank you, Janet. Of course, our keynote speaker, El Fursan. Thank you, El, for being with us today from USC. We have a special guest, the woman that created the Los Angeles chapter many, many years ago and had a stroke a number of years ago, but is able to be with us today. I want to give a special welcome to Norma Foster. I saw Norma come in. Where is Norma? There she is. Thank you, Norma, very much. From Citi, Colleen Glavin, Senior VP of City Community Development. Thank you, Colleen. From the UN Foundation Better World campaign, our guest speaker from Washington, D.C. today, Geordie Hanna. Thank you, Geordie, for making the trip out. Rashi Kallur, Vice President for Southern California City Community Development. Rashi, thank you. I only have about 74 to go. Nala Kayali, one of our award recipients from Access California Services. Thank you. Of course, we have Linda Lopez, formerly with the Office of the Mayor, Chief of Immigration Affairs. Linda, thank you for being here. And just a couple more. Kush Malhotra, Managing Director and Regional Markets Manager for the Western Region South. Kush, thank you. I think the Community Liaison Representative for Assemblyman Richard Bloom should be here. Tim Pershing. Did Tim make it yet? Okay. And, of course, another one of our award recipients, Gillian Sorensen. Thank you for coming out from New York, Gillian, and being with us today. Longtime UNA and UN supporter, longtime UN employee and worldwide representative of the UN, and a board member for many years of the International Rescue Committee. That's Gillian. Marguerite Womack, Director of Community Development for the Youth Policy Institute. Marguerite. And Iris Zuniga, Executive VP for the Youth Policy Institute, I believe is here. And last but hardly least, a man who makes a huge difference in Southern California, the Executive Director of the International Rescue Committee in Los Angeles, Marty Zog. Marty, thank you very much. Great. And the Consul General of Mexico has arrived, Marcela Solorio. Thank you, Marcela, for being with us today. So having said that, you know, just a couple of brief comments that I'd like to make before I pass the torch to our next presenter, or to a video that we have coming up. But you don't have to look very far to see some information about the immigration situation. Just in yesterday's Los Angeles Times, immigration tent courts open in Texas. So it's talking about processing immigrants. But just in the first paragraph, the woman arrived well before dawn with her 4-year-old daughter for the first full day of hearings Monday as the U.S. government's new tent court for migrants opened on the banks of the Rio Grande. Almost immediately Alejandra Amador, an asylum seeker from Honduras, felt anxious. She didn't know that the immigration judge would be appearing via video from San Antonio, that this would be the first of several hearings, or that she would not have access to a lawyer. I could go on and on. It's just a travesty, in my opinion. You know, we are a non-political organization, and nonetheless, based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and U.S. Policy for the years and years and years, what we see going on, in my opinion, is a travesty, not just at our border, but the whole refugee and immigration situation in the world. And I'm just thrilled that the presenters today, our keynote speakers, and others will be sharing more detailed comments about that. But just right in the Declaration of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was 70 and a half years old now, it talks about these human rights that we take for granted, that I take for granted. I've never had to cross the border in fear. And so it's just remarkable, you know, in a very challenging way, what we are experiencing. And so I appreciate, again, you all being here and hearing what we have, what today is going to be about. So without any further ado, I'd like to ask for a video, a little bit of a welcome address from a friend of ours. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Mayor Eric Garcetti. Welcome to the 12th Annual West Coast Global Forum. Gatherings like this one are essential in building a country and a global community that lives up to our core values, because we know that the United States and our partners are not defined by the divisive rhetoric we hear too often in the world today. We are defined by our actions to welcome refugees and asylum seekers to our shores, to give them the resources they need to live out their dreams. This forum is filled with men and women dedicated to this mission and determined to ensure that our immigrant communities can prosper and access a better quality of life now and down the road. And there's no better place to discuss and debate these steps than right here in the City of Angels, a city shaped by the promise of freedom, opportunity, and belonging for all, a city of second chances. And to those being honored today, thank you for everything you do to promote the integration of newcomers to our city and to cities worldwide. And thank you all for joining this event and helping us build a brighter, fairer, more just future.
Before we get to a brief video about the Sustainable Development Goals, I'd like to just thank the committee that put this event together. So if you were on the committee, would you please rise, stand up for a moment, let us acknowledge you. If you were on the Global Forum Committee, Mel, Ginny, David, Marcia, Barbara Tebiani, Barbara Mueller, and if you were on the committee, Ike Kamasani, Isabel, John Bainan, David Tuckman, thank you guys very much for the work you did on this event. Okay, let's go with the video. Thank you.
We can be.
We must be the first generation
to end extreme poverty.
The generation
most determined
to fight injustice and inequalities.
The generation that saves the planet from climate change.
And this is how it will get done. The global goals.
A 15-year plan
For everyone, everywhere.
with no one left behind.
We will live in a world
Where nobody
anywhere lives in extreme poverty.
Where no one
Goes hungry.
Where no one
wakes in the morning
asking if there will be food today.
We will live in a world
where no child has to die.
Diseases we know how to cure.
and where proper health care
is a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world
Where everyone
goes to school. And education gives us the knowledge
and skills
for a fulfilling life.
We will live in a world where all girls and all women have equal opportunities
to thrive
and be powerful
and safe.
we cannot succeed if half the world is head down.
We will live in a world
Where all people can get clean water.
And proper toilets
At home,
at school
and at work.
We will live in a world where
there is sustainable energy for everyone.
Heat, light,
And power for the whole planet.
without destroying the planet.
We will live in a world where economies prosper. A new wealth.
Leads to decent jobs.
for everyone.
And we will live in a world where our industry,
Our infrastructure and our
Best innovations.
Are not just used to make money, but to make all our lives better.
We will live in a world
where prejudices and extremes of inequality
are defeated.
Inside our countries,
And between different countries.
where people live in cities and communities
that are safe, progressive,
and support everyone who lives there.
where we replace
What we consume. Planet where we put back what we take out of the earth.
We live in a world that is decisively rolling back the threat of climate change.
where we restore and protect the life in our oceans and seas.
will restore and protect
Life on land,
The forests,
animals,
The earth itself.
With peace between and inside countries.
where all governments are open.
And answer to us for what they do at home and abroad.
And the justice rules.
with everyone equal before the law.
Where all countries and we their people.
Work together.
Partnerships of all kinds.
To make these goals a reality.
These are the United Nations global goals
For sustainable development.
Let's get to work.
So those are the global goals, and to some of the organizations that sponsored today's event, there's information on the tables around the perimeter here for you to peruse as you throughout the day. And so, as we often do at the Global Forum, I want to come down to the audience, to you, and ask you to share what has you being here today. What is your commitment to resolving the refugee and migration issue? What is it your organization perhaps does? What would you want to share to have yourself and your organization be known for its commitment to the refugee and migrant and immigration situation? So I'm going to take this mic, and actually I'll take this mic. And we'll come down. So who has some thoughts they would like to share about why you're here? Why is this topic important to you? And what difference does it make if this situation were to be more resolved? And the first hand I saw is on the other side of the room, but first of all, is there anybody over here that would like to make a comment about that? Anyone at all, your comment is welcome. Barbara Mueller?
I just want to remind you we're all immigrants. My grandfather immigrated from Hungary to make sure that I was safe and that our grandchildren were safe, and I thank God for letting us in.
Great. Did I see another hand over here? Virginia? Now, Virginia, you're involved with Citizens Climate Lobby, is that right? And would you agree that the refugee and migration situation has a little something to do with the climate situation?
Undoubtedly. Okay. Yeah, I have a table here for Citizens Climate Lobby. We have been working with Congress trying to get a bill. We actually have a bill in Congress to price carbon so that we can all make decisions from our pocket, and thus no need to persuade the whole population. Refugees are definitely caused, in great part. Climate change is really creating a huge mass migration. Things will get worse. So it is very essential that we, not only to care for them, but to prevent them. Most refugees want to stay home. So please visit our table. We hope to have at least one big step towards a solution by reducing emissions with this bill, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. You can write your congressman, and we can be happy to deliver your message to him in person. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Excuse me. We'll kind of work our way around the room. Yes, please do.
Nancy Martin, Santa Barbara Peace Corps Group. UNA Group. I think what we need to do is cherish every refugee because they really know what's important in life. And at some point, we may end up being refugees too.
This is very true. Gentlemen, sir?
I'm here to say I'm a refugee myself. I came in the US 3 years ago from Afghanistan originally, but lived 19 years of my life in different refugee camps. I'm here to say that refugees can be part of the solution, part of the challenges that we face today. They can be part of the solution. They are not only problem. When we see problem as a problem, when we see them as a problem, we dehumanize them. We see them as a them, not us. But when we see them as part of the solution, that is when change happens. Thank you.
Thank you. By the way, on your tables, you have a sheet that looks like this on your tables. This is an opportunity for you at your tables to, in between various conversations, to have conversations at your table about what actions are you currently taking in this realm. What could you take in the future, and perhaps even what promises of actions you would be taking. So this is something for your table to discuss throughout the day as well. So thank you for your comments, Kadeem. Pardon? There's a prize for the best suggestion. Okay. Ja?
All right. My name is Ja. I'm the founder of a nonprofit organization, Unified Nation Foundation Infrastructure. And one of the things that I share with the kids in elementary schools that we focus on after-school program, we're sharing with them the UN goals of sustainable development through art. And what I wanted to mention is art is brought to us by all people. So one of the things that we focus on when we get to the equality is to accept art and to, embrace it as culture and look at it as something that could expand on how we look at life and expand on our knowledge and our freedoms.
Great. Thank you. Time for just a couple more as I make it across to the first couple of people that raised their hands. Let me go back to where was I see the first hand that was written, right? I'll come right there in a second.
Hello, my name is Ellen Snortland, and I represent many organizations. I'm on the advisory boards of 50/50 Leadership, Empowerment Self-Defense Global. I've been a lifelong member of the United Nations Association, and I'm on the board of the National Women's History Alliance. And I'm here to urge you to make sure that whatever you do for gender equality, that women are on the front lines of environmental degradation, and they're the ones that are impacted most by refugee and migration. So it's not just like, oh, wouldn't that be nice if they were equal? We need those voices, we need those hands on deck, because they can tell you firsthand the impact of global climate crisis.
Great, thank you. And just, go ahead, acknowledge Ellen. Ellen's very modest. I'm going to share something else about Ellen, because it's women around the world that are oftentimes the victim or the subject of rape, physical violence, etc. And whether it be in refugee camps, in South Central, or near the Santa Monica Promenade, it doesn't matter. Anywhere in the world, this stuff happens. And so Ellen is the writer and producer of a film called Beauty Bites Beast. I recommend your organization have a screening of her film. It's an incredible film to see how women anywhere of any size can learn to protect themselves and overcome some real serious stuff that could happen. So thank you, Ellen, for creating that.
Thank you, Barry. Thank
you. Okay.
Hello, I'm Phyllis Chastain. I'm a PhD student. I've written over 80 ebooks, and I'm affiliated with several groups, including Delta Sigma Theta, which is a 100-year-old community service organization, the LA County Empowerment Congress for Arts, Culture, and Economic Development. So I'm here focusing on advocating for education and conflict resolution. I think those are two things that are very important. My parents, I consider them refugees from Mississippi, from the 1920s, 30s, after World War II, moved to California. So this country, I was imagining the other day, what would we do if we had a day without immigrants or refugees. No one would show up. And I think that's something to be thankful for and remember and advocate for positive social change. That's my goal.
Great. Thank you very much. One more comment here. This woman here, right here. Then we'll go back.
Yeah, Randy would have to notice me. My name is Geraldine Stapleton, and I'm here representing the Peace Alliance, which advocates for a U.S. Department of Peace Building. We do believe in violence prevention, nonviolent communications. We want to make the world a sustainable, kind, loving place so we're not polluting our world with the wars and so on and so forth. I'm also the immediate past president of the California National Organization for Women, past board, national board members, so on and so forth. So to echo Ellen, yes, advocating that we do have women sitting at the peace tables. If we are going to accomplish everything that we need to make this world a sustainable world, we need women participating at all of these tables.
Later. We'll be coming back out. We'll be coming back out to you in a little bit when we have a panel of our Global Citizen Award recipients. So we will have more audience participation from you and your comments in a little bit. But for right now, I would like to go ahead and introduce a friend of mine, a friend of ours, representative of the Better World campaign from Washington, D.C. It's my real pleasure to be introducing to you in just a moment when I get back here onto the stage. So we're very thrilled to have the support of the UN Foundation. You know, the UN Association was created by Eleanor Roosevelt when the UN was formed, taking the League of Nations local chapters and converting them to a UN association. And about 5 or so years ago, the UN Association became a part of the UN Foundation. Under the umbrella of the UN Foundation, in addition to the UN Association, are programs such as Girl Up, Nothing But Nets, Shot at Life, the Better World Campaign, etc. So we get great support from the foundation. It's a real thrill to have Geordie Hanna with us. Geordie, please come on. Thank you very much. Please welcome Geordie Hanna.
So let me say that half the reason I came out here, besides your hospitality, was to leave Washington and the current administration, and they followed me out here. So you can't win, as I should have known already. So before I kind of explain a little bit more about myself and what I do and why I'm here, I just want to start. I want to start with this picture here. Is this Ken? Next one there. Great. So I want to begin my talk here because I took it a few months ago at a school for refugees on the border of Ethiopia and South Sudan. And I think it really sums up current U.S. policies regarding refugees and migration. For these students, they carry with them the hope that the U.S., for decades, of course, the world's most generous humanitarian contributor to humanitarian assistance and the largest resettler of refugees, will provide support. But in the students holding the flag upside down, you also see the cold reality. Right now, in many ways, U.S. policy has been reversed. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So just in terms of my introductions, you understand why I was there and what I do. As Barry said, I work with the United Nations Foundation Better World Campaign. We were created 20 years ago by Ted Turner at a time when the U.S. was in danger of losing its vote at the UN, over $1 billion in debt. And Mr. Turner felt there needed an entity making the case to the UN's value. And we do that in a number of different ways. So we partner with a certain NBA champion from Northern California around global health and malaria. We meet with members of Congress, both on Capitol Hill, but we also take them abroad to see the UN's work up close and its vital efforts overseas. Next. And so anytime we do these trips, we try to make them timely. And so we've done a number looking at issues related to refugees and migration. So over the past several years, I have traveled to Turkey, Uganda, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, DR Congo, Ethiopia, and South Sudan, to name a few, which of course hold over 50% of the world's refugees and IDPs. And my travel has made clear the vital role of the United Nations, that entities like the World Food Program, which provides food aid to 91 million people in 83 countries, that UNICEF, which supplies vaccines to 45% of the world's children, UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, that's right now assisting over 70 million displaced. That's the largest since they began recording data. But my travel has also made clear the essential role that the United States still plays on a host of challenges, but including refugees and migration. The U.S. is still the largest donor to international humanitarian assistance, accounting for between a quarter and a third of expenditures. I should say, though, that as a percentage of GDP, the U.S. is not near the top, but our funding is still vital. So right here, you kind of see some of the big buckets. For the World Food Program, the U.S. provides over 30% of its funding, $2.5 billion. For UN Refugee Agency, almost 30%. For UNICEF, significant portions. But it's also true that many of the long-standing bipartisan principles that have marked U.S. foreign policy around refugees and migrants are being targeted. You are likely aware of the actions taken or threatened by the Trump administration. I want to focus my time today on what Congress is doing or trying to do to push back in certain cases. Now, over the past several years, there have been attacks on many fronts, as I'm sure you know, and spoiler alert, what I'm about to say is going to be quite depressing. But there is certainly some positive things we've seen. Now, right from the beginning, in the president's first budget to Congress, they called for significant cuts to humanitarian assistance. But also, right from the beginning, Congress, Republicans and Democrats, have flatly rejected these cuts. As just examples, in last year's final spending bill, there was $7.8 billion in the overall migration and refugee assistance accounts. This was $1 billion above the president's request. This year, we are seeing corresponding levels. And for key UN agencies, we've been able to hold the line. So World Food Program, UNICEF have maintained their levels of funding. And UNHCR, actually again, the UN Refugee Agency, last year received the highest amount it has ever gotten, $1.6 billion. So this support has been vital and incredibly necessary as needs are only increasing. But I want to switch to a less positive story, which is third country resettlement. Now, for brief background, under the 1980 Refugee Act, the president each year determines a U.S. refugee admissions ceiling. For decades, the U.S. led the world. In 1980, it was over 230,000 individuals allowed into the country. In 2016, almost 100,000. Much has changed. For 2017, the U.S. resettled 33,000. This was the lowest in the formal resettlement program's history. In 2018, 23,000. This was the first time the U.S. did not lead the world since the Refugee Act was implemented. Canada led it, as you see here. And as you may have heard, the administration is reportedly considering a plan that would reduce refugee admissions to zero this year. That's right, zero, effectively ending the program. And sadly, there's not much Congress can do to stop this. The president is supposed to consult with Congress, but the administration does get to decide. And this may be coming out any day now in terms of what they're going to do. We were heartened to see recently, actually just last week, dozens of retired generals and admirals sent a letter to the president urging a robust admissions goal. The military's leaders stated, quote, "When America turns its back on refugees, we are challenged to call on our allies to accept them, ultimately risking premature returns that not only put refugees in harm's way, but also further cycles of instability and insecurity in critical regions." As troubling as this new policy is, it's also important to recognize that resettlement is only a tiny fraction of the overall need. Typically, less than 1% of the 20 million refugees under UNHCR's mandate are ever resettled. The great majority of refugees are in developing countries near the places they left. And for decades, our foreign aid policy, though implemented imperfectly, has prioritized humanitarian need over political ties and support to countries that harbor refugees, places like Lebanon and Turkey and Ethiopia. As former President Reagan declared, a hungry child knows no politics. Yet the Trump administration wants to depart from this principle. They are considering a plan which would dramatically overhaul our foreign aid to be far more transactional, where we would only give to friends and allies. This has not been proposed yet, but it's reported as imminent. What has already been enacted, though, is one example of this theory being put into practice. This occurred last year when the administration cut off all aid, over $300 million, and that was aid to schools, to hospitals, to the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees, due to the political positions espoused by the Palestinian leadership. This year, Congress may restore some of the funding. In the House bill that was passed earlier this summer, there was $171 million for UNRWA. The Senate bill, which actually just came out today, unfortunately does not have any funding, but this may be worked out in conference over the next few months. Of course, in terms of closer to home, no doubt you have heard about the administration's plans for the southern border and countering the flow of migrants from Central America and the Northern Triangle. We'll hear more about that today. But the administration seeks to both slash U.S. foreign assistance funding and block entry. And unfortunately, for the time being, the Supreme Court is allowing the administration to block legitimate Central American asylum seekers from having their fair and legal shot at a safe life in the United States. Now, in Congress, there is bipartisan legislation to counter this approach. It's sponsored by the lead Republican, Mike McCall from Texas, and the lead Democrat, Elliot Engel from New York, of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. This U.S. Northern Triangle Engagement Act will authorize almost $600 million in funding to the region. It would prohibit the funds from being reprogrammed or eliminated, and it would strengthen U.S. national security by addressing the root causes of migration from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, such as corruption and economic stagnation. It has passed the House, but not yet moved in the Senate, a recurring theme here. And I want to conclude my remarks with the comments of one of the legislation's lead sponsors. He's speaking specifically to this bill, but his comments make a larger point. Committee Chairman Engel stated, quote, "It's a dangerous, terrifying thing to move your family to an unknown place. And many people only make that decision when they feel like they have no other option. The best way for the United States to address the central challenges facing these countries is by investing in a safer and more prosperous Central America and helping to create more opportunities for those who live there." And over the past few years, Congress has shown its commitment, and it's incumbent upon all of us to use our voices not only to challenge the administration, but also to champion those leading the charge in Congress. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to take questions later. And I just want to say now what some say in the beginning, but to thank Barry, thank the Southern California Division for inviting me, and it's such a pleasure to be here surrounded by such an august group of panelists and award winners. Thank you.
If Ginny Hatfield, the past president of the Southern California chapter, San Fernando Valley chapter, there you are. Okay, great. Please welcome Ginny. She's a division officer, chapter leader, and more importantly, this event would not be happening without her assistance. Ginny, you know, your daughter, Ginny put on a beautiful wedding for her daughter a couple of months ago and was not able to be an official co-chair. But trust me, she is absolutely every bit a total chair, co-chair, whatever you want to call her. Ginny, thank you so much. And you have something to introduce, someone to introduce? Great. Take it away. Thank you, Ginny.
Thank you.
Please
And
welcome Ginny Hatfield.
Thank you. I'll just put on some glasses so I can see what I'm doing. Yeah. Okay. We're very fortunate today to have El Farsan, who I haven't met yet, but I hope to soon, as our keynote speaker, as her perspective on refugees and migration comes from firsthand knowledge of the plight of those seeking refuge from war, violence, or persecution. She herself is the daughter of an internally displaced woman during the Lebanese War. She is a migrant who has lived in Jordan, Canada, Lebanon, and now the United States. She knows whereof she speaks. Her passion and professional training have culminated in a career path dedicated to improving the lives of those individuals we're here to discuss today. I'm sorry, it fell. Thank you. I got it now, I think. Okay. Let me just repeat that last paragraph. Her passion and professional training have culminated in a career path dedicated to improving the lives of those individuals we're here to discuss today. Let's just get a glimpse at some of her achievements. In the US, she organized volunteer missions of lawyers and social workers to the detention centers in Tijuana and aimed at documenting the abuses and then proposing recommendations. She organized an asylum clinic and resource fairs in conjunction with immigrant right groups for Central American asylum seekers in Los Angeles. Using USC's human capital and tech resources, she's trying to create artificial solutions to immigration resources, i.e., using AI to streamline how refugees, migrants, and asylum seekers ask and receive resources. She's currently building a Trojan Immigration Defense Corps, an academic program that will work on behalf of immigrants across Southern California. Some of her work in the Middle East. In conjunction with the US State Department, she helped to expose a network of traffickers who were sexually exploiting LGBTQ Syrian refugees in Lebanon. This involved a year-long investigation collaborating with many Western missions, diplomatic missions. She was heavily involved in reform of labor law policy affecting foreign and domestic workers in Lebanon and other parts of the Middle East. And she managed to get meaningful reform in Lebanon. This paved the way for advocacy on behalf of women's rights, especially in that country. She was also able to leverage support for LGBTQ groups in Canada and the US to effectuate change in Lebanon towards that community. Elle's current position is Director of the Immigrants and Global Migration Initiative within the Gould School of Law at USC. The mission is to provide direct services to immigrant communities through research and advocacy and become the premier national hub for intellectual discussion, debate, and insight regarding immigration, migration, and immigrant populations. Our speaker has traveled extensively throughout the Middle East, Europe, and North America. She speaks several languages and has agreed to join us today to speak to a topic she knows so well as only she can. Let's give her a warm welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Marhaba for my Arab fellows in the room. Yes. Thank you, Ginny, for this very generous introduction. Before I begin, I would like to thank my friend, Barry Simon, who, became a friend in such a short time and benefited from his wisdom, support, and hope. that there is generosity in this humanity and that people can be good. So thank you, Barry, for bringing us together here. Now I'm gonna do what I always do, which is not listen to what people ask me to do, because Barry asked me to share with you my story of migration. As Jeannie mentioned, my mother was internally displaced during the Lebanese Civil War, and I myself experienced migration in several countries. But Barry, if it's okay, I'm going to take it in a different direction and instead summarize my story in just one anecdote that illustrates the feeling of otherness and sometimes exclusion that I have experienced here since I moved in 2015. When meeting people for the first time, I often get that comment about my accent. Oh, I'm hearing an accent here. Where are you coming from? And I often give two answers, very different, and each one of them gives me a different reaction. When I tell them that my first language is French, people often praise France. They talk about Paris, the wine, the cheese, and then very, very often they would say, oh, the French are so romantic. However, when I say I am Lebanese, I almost always get one of these three reactions. How did you get here? Why don't you wear a hijab? And are women now allowed to drive in Lebanon? Now, I landed in the States with 15 years of experience working with international agencies, the State Department, been to 22 countries, speak 3 languages, I have a graduate degree. In short, I am privileged. I recognize my privilege. So if these were the kinds of reactions that I would routinely get for my slightly Frenchy accent, imagine the kind of reactions and questions brown immigrants are faced with when they don't have the privileges that I have. I will leave it to that. As I prepared to speak with you all today, my first instinct was to talk about immigrants' rights as human rights, as civil rights. That's what I believe. Because often immigrants are dehumanized and blamed for the results of past economic and political policies they had nothing to do with. Furthermore, we're constantly bombarded with alternative facts that distort the reality and create false narratives about immigrants. So in order to set the record straight, I would like to leave you with real empirical facts and focus on 2 things in my speech. The first being, what are the benefits of migration, especially through our experience here in California? And the second is, what is actually happening worldwide with refugees and immigration, and where do we go from here? So what does our California experience teach us? California is the epitome of the positive impact of migration. The fact that immigrant success and massive contributions to our nation's prosperity counters the narrative of fear and ignorance that has infected this country. In fact, states that host most immigrants are more tolerant and accepting and see the value of immigrants, whereas the states that don't have immigrants are fearful of them because their fear is out of ignorance. California is home of 11 million immigrants. 27% of California's population is foreign-born, more than double the percentage of the rest of the country. I'll get to the point why I'm giving you all these numbers. 1 in 2 children in California have at least one foreign-born parent. That volume of migration did not stand in the way of California becoming the largest US economy, $2.8 trillion, and the world's 5th largest economy ahead of the UK. In fact, migration made that happen. California leads in innovation, technology, the creative and entertainment industries. Major companies such as Google, Yahoo, Intel, eBay, and many others that transformed our world were founded by immigrants here in California. Immigrants have founded 51% of our country's startup companies, and immigrants create jobs. They do not take them away from us. We really need to build a new immigration policy based on empirical evidence, not abstract fears and emotions. And I'm not trying to say that all immigrants are high graduates, or that only high graduates are valuable. Every human being is valuable. I am just trying to give you evidence to push back on the false narrative. We need visa programs that bring talented and empirical and entrepreneurial immigrants to the United States. And we need to consider migration as a magnet for human capital. We need to remind ourselves, because history always teaches us, we need to remember the 30 million immigrants who arrived in the United States between 1820 and 1920, who transformed America by supplying the labor that led to the great industrialization era of this country. It is time we move from a reactive narrative to speaking up about the positive impact of migration on this nation. Now, what is happening globally, and where do we go from here? I would like us to keep the refugee crisis in perspective. Again, the numbers. There are 258 million international migrants around the world. That's 3.4% of the 7.7 billion world population. 3.4% of international migrants. 70.8 million citizens of the world were forcibly displaced by war or violence or climate change out of those 258. Now, true, this is twice as many people as 20 years ago. We have a problem. People are being forced out of their homes. 2.3 million more than the previous year, and that is greater than the population of Thailand. We're rapidly going through these numbers. Half of the 70.8 million forcibly displaced are children. And only a fraction of those, less than 30 million of the 70 million, are refugees and asylum seekers. That's 0.38% of the world population. 0.38% of the world population. So let me be clear. What we are experiencing today is a crisis of morals, a crisis of consciousness, certainly not a crisis of numbers. We do have the means to solve this. This is not big. War, conflict, and insecurity are currently the main reasons behind people seeking refuge in other countries. And the top 6 country refugees are coming from are Syria, Afghanistan, South Sudan, Myanmar, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Somalia. However, a shout out to you guys in the back. The Internal Displacement Monitoring Center projects that 143 million climate refugees will have 143 million climate refugees by 2050. Divided by 3 regions, 86 million in sub-Saharan Africa, 48 million in South Asia, and 17 million in Latin America. Get ready, Mr. Trump. Refugees will be forced to move due to the following slow onset climate change impacts: decreased crop productivity, water shortages, and rising sea levels. We know that this is coming. By the year 2100, rising sea levels could force up to 2 billion people inland, creating then a refugee crisis among 1/5 of the world population. So continuing to deny climate change will lead to severe climate injustice, which will impact first those who are most vulnerable and will end up catching up to the world, including the global West, which is now paying fractions of money to developing countries to host 85% of the global refugee population. We must act now before it's too late. So what is the crisis the world is currently facing? The double emergency. The first is a crisis of diplomacy, with the failure of solving the conflict in Syria, Afghanistan, Myanmar, and other places. And the second is a crisis of empathy. As the global north continues to turn its back on the most vulnerable populations, as I said, lower and poorer income countries receive 85% of the world refugees, and that's creating its own set of challenges and potentially explosive situations and human rights abuses. To give you some figure illustration about that, the European Union, population 500 million, hosted 1.8 million refugees. The US, population 350 million, hosted, as you mentioned, 23,000 last year. Now Lebanon, where I come from, population 5.9 million, is hosting 2 million Syrian and Palestinian refugees, rendering it the country with the highest number of refugees per capita, with 1 refugee for every 4 nationals. That's a crisis. Our country, the United States, is not full. We are manufacturing a crisis at the southern border. People should not be kept in cages or left to hang in the cold, to gangs and violence in camps on the other side of the border. I'll wrap up with this. As the scholar Paul Kramer puts it, throughout our history, Lady Liberty had 3 meanings. It's upon us today to choose which one represents us as a nation. Is it the Guardian Statute, the protectionist and isolationist that is anti-immigrant and guards our shores like a border control agent? Or is it the Imperial Statute, the American liberty that is set out to conquer the world? Or is it the Exile Statute, the one that welcomes the tired, the poor, and huddled masses, which our nation prospered and grew upon their shoulders? I know which one I am rooting for. Thank you.
On behalf of UNA USA SoCal, we have a little certificate kind of commemorating the event today and Elle's participation in it. And I will take on the glasses again. On behalf of UNA USA Southern California Division, we commend you for your years of advocacy on behalf of those seeking refuge from war, violence, persecution, or economic deprivation. We applaud your efforts and thank you for sharing your expertise with us as keynote speaker and panel moderator at the 12th Annual West Coast Global Forum. And the mayor of Los Angeles, who was with us on video earlier, has also sent a little token of his appreciation to Elle. As mayor of the city of Los Angeles, on behalf of his residents, I would like to congratulate you on your participation in the UNA USA Southern California 12th Annual West Coast Global Forum, Refugees and Migration, the Global Challenge, and the Local Impact. Your expertise on immigration and global social issues and your dedication as an immigrant rights advocate is admirable. Thank you for contributions to the immigrant community of the city of Los Angeles.
And also, Geordie, come on up for a second as well. Since we have basically two keynotes today, Elle and Geordie, I want to present on behalf of the city of Los Angeles a certificate of recognition to Geordie Hanna. Pretty much says the same thing as mayor of the city of LA, and on behalf of its residents, the mayor would like to congratulate you on your participation in the UNA USA Southern California 12th Annual West Coast Global Forum. Thank you for your dedication to peacekeeping efforts around the world and supporting refugees locally and globally. So, Geordie, thank you again. Okay. As we begin the presentation of our Global Citizen Awards, I want to be welcoming Linda Lopez. As I mentioned, Linda had been appointed by the mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, as the new chief of the Office of Immigrant Affairs in September of 2013. So she served in that role for 6 years. In her role, she was responsible for providing overall strategic advice to Mayor Garcetti on his immigration policy agenda and creating innovative programs to integrate immigrants into the city's social, economic, and political fabric. Prior to her appointment by Mayor Garcetti, Dr. Lopez was an associate dean for diversity and strategic initiatives at USC's Dornsife College and formerly a program officer at the National Science Foundation in Washington, D.C. She's an expert in public policy and received her master's and PhD at USC in political science. I'm sure there's some Trojan fans in the audience. She's published in several peer-reviewed journals on public policy issues affecting racial and ethnic communities and has examined voting participation. She's regularly contributed her expertise to various media outlets, Univision, NBC, La Opinion, LA Times, etc. She was recently selected as a German Marshall Fund Fellow for the Transatlantic Inclusion Leadership Network and has provided strategic advice to European governments on how to address refugee settlement and immigration integration. It's a real pleasure that we have who is now a consultant on her own, working for the betterment of the world and making a difference for all people. Let me invite you to please welcome Dr. Linda Lopez.
How's everyone doing? It's so great to be here. It's really nice to see a lot of familiar faces in the room. As Barry, and thank you so much, Barry, for that kind introduction. I was with the mayor and with the mayor's office for about 6 years when we reestablished the Office of Immigrant Affairs here in the city of Los Angeles. And it's a really great honor to be here. I left about 2 weeks ago and I'm pursuing another opportunity. But when Barry said, you know, Linda, I would really want you to come here to celebrate City Community Development Bank, one of our incredible partners in the advancement of immigrant and refugee integration here in the city? I said, absolutely. So thank you so much for inviting me today. I want to also acknowledge a few people in the room that have really been, to me at least, great partners throughout this career in the mayor's office. And I want to give a special shout out to Marty from the International Rescue Committee first, because Marty was there when I first started at the mayor's office and has always been a huge advisor to me on refugee issues. Under the Obama administration, when I worked very closely with the White House on integration efforts at the federal level, but also throughout the years. So I want to thank you, Marty, publicly for all of your great advice throughout the years. But I'm here today as we celebrate an incredible organization because even though Citi is a bank, they are an organization that is fierce, that is visionary, that is innovative. And I want to congratulate Citi Community Development for all their tireless work in advancing an agenda that is first and foremost for the integration of our immigrant and refugee populations here in the city. And to accomplish this big sort of meta goal of creating an inclusive LA, Citi has been an incredible partner and collaborator and thinker on how we can approach and how we can really leverage a lot of our resources to deliver services for immigrant and refugee populations. As Elle eloquently said earlier, immigrants and refugees are the engines of our local economy. They are contributors. They are the people that make LA what it is, the city of angels. Our collaboration with Citi has led to the creation of a number of opportunities for the most vulnerable in the city, and often those who are voiceless. I strongly believe that it is through these collaborations that we have been able to advance an inclusive agenda where everyone is welcome and where everyone can thrive. Their investment in our local nonprofit immigrant and refugee serving organizations and institutions in LA, and to build that capacity to deliver those critical services, whether it be financial education or financial inclusion or citizenship or economic opportunity, those are key in building that access and inclusion. The partnerships that we've engaged in include the Cities for Citizenship initiative, which is now growing strong in more than 80 cities across America, which essentially provides financial inclusion and education to thousands of families, children, and immigrants with immigrant backgrounds and refugee backgrounds on their path to citizenship. We've also created an important financial inclusion program here in the city with the Mexican consulate, and I want to also acknowledge Ambassador Solorio and her team for being here, because when we started that process of designing the Ventanilla Financiera in the Mexican consulate, we borrowed it from New York. So for the New Yorkers that are in the house today, I'm sorry, but ours is better. And I think one of the things that was so beautiful about this partnership was to engage with James Alva, who is right back here, who came to us in the city and said, why not do something different? We have something in New York, but LA is a place where we have more Mexicans outside of Mexico, and why not think big on what would be possible here? So we worked with Adriana, who's also here today, the Consul for Community Affairs. I hope I didn't misrepresent your role, but And we worked, and we designed, we co-designed, and it's this partnership now with the city, with the Mexican consulate, with city community development, and now it's grown to, I think, all over the country, right? This Ventanilla, which provides one-on-one financial counseling for immigrant and refugee populations, but mostly Mexican immigrants in the consulate. I'm really proud of that partnership. I'm really proud of that collaboration because it shows us the possibilities that are, that we can do together. And that's really what collaboration is all about. And so on behalf of the, I think, city, even though I'm not there anymore, we've been really proud partners with the city team. And we really recognize today, I think, and celebrate their leadership, their vision, their innovation to provide that economic inclusion and that economic access to people that don't have access to the financial mainstream. And it has impacted thousands of people, not only in LA, but around the country, to be able to give that to people who oftentimes don't have access to capital or don't have access to financial education is, I think, very critical. So on behalf of me and me as a partner, I want to really thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the partnerships that we've created. And I also want to recognize Hale, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Hale Bezadi, who is also part of the city family, city as in C-I-T-I, not C-I-T-Y, City of LA. So Hale, I'd like for you to come, and we want to celebrate you as well as being part of the city team, but also because you will share with the group your own background and how this is all connected to your own experience coming to the United States as an immigrant yourself. Oh, and congratulations to City and to Holly for the Global Citizenship Award. I forgot to mention that, so yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Linda, for that very wonderful introduction. And such a huge thank you to the United Nations of Southern California for this wonderful recognition and celebration of immigrants and refugees. It's especially important for me and a great honor to accept on behalf of City as I stand before you as a political asylee myself. I was born and raised in Tehran, Iran. My family and I lived there until I was 16 years old, and we were forced to move due to the revolution of 1979. I am extremely proud to be an Iranian American. We were welcomed in this country, and as I look around at this diaspora community, I can't help to be proud of how we have thrived, how we have added value to our local economies and the communities. This is especially evident in Southern California, where there is such a large community of Iranian Americans. This is evidence that having a level playing field where all talented people can shine regardless of their skin tone, gender, or whom they love adds a richness not found in uniformity. As an individual, I know that my background helps me be more culturally sensitive to others with diverse backgrounds and helps me understand nuances and unspoken messages. I firmly believe that my identity is what drew me to City. I crossed borders at a very young age and came into contact with so many different types of people who enriched my life for the better. I see the benefit in diversity, and thankfully, so does City. That diversity is present in our client base, and by creating an environment which celebrates everyone's unique perspectives, both clients and employees feel heard and valued, building meaningful relationships so germane to a successful business. I want to talk to you a little bit about City's commitment to building more inclusive communities, exactly as Linda commented. There are over 70 million displaced people worldwide. We've heard that statistic a few times today. And with most of them settling into cities, integrating them into their new local communities is an economic imperative. As a global bank, Citi operates in over 100 countries, including some nations that generate displaced people and also host significant refugee populations. During this time of unprecedented urban transformation and migration into cities, Citi has played a critical role in identifying and implementing innovative solutions that support refugee and immigrant populations. Our experiences have shown us that through partnerships with organizations such as the IRC, and critically with the cities that are working to successfully integrate refugees and immigrants, there is much the private sector can do. Most obviously, we can use our voice, our global expertise, and financial support. Last year, the International Rescue Committee, with support from Citi, released a major report titled Urban Refuge: How Cities Are Building Inclusive Communities. The report examines the efforts of more than 20 cities across 4 continents, from New York to Amman, Kampala to Cox's Bazar, Los Angeles to Mogadishu, to integrate refugees and internally displaced persons. It highlights key learnings with the aim of providing cities as well as the private and humanitarian sectors a roadmap on how to address urban displacement and build inclusive communities. The report made clear that the private sector has an important role to play to help cities innovate, support targeted investments, and share best practices. And through the Rescuing Futures program with the IRC, part of Citi Foundation's Pathways to Progress initiative, we've deployed funding, volunteers, and our voice to support displaced individuals in cities, illustrating the vital role private-public partnerships can play in coming up with solutions to difficult challenges. Rescuing Futures is providing 1,000 young urban refugees, IDPs, and disadvantaged local youth in Athens, Amman, and Yola, Nigeria, with entrepreneurship training so they can build sustainable livelihoods and contribute positively to their local communities. In closing, I would like to take a quick minute to introduce a film to you and show you a brief trailer. This short film was created by our brand partner, Girl Rising, a leading nonprofit organization dedicated to using stories to inspire action, to shift how the world values girls, along with the International Rescue Committee, whose mission is to respond to the world's worst humanitarian crises and help people survive, recover, and regain control of their future. This film also marks the expansion of Citi's partnership with Girl Rising, which began in 2017. We're delighted to be the founding partner of this film and global campaign in support of the most vulnerable girls, refugees. You'll hear the story of Nazro, a young refugee woman who views education as her lifeline, yet every day faces formidable challenges in accessing this fundamental human right. Nazro's story and bravery will help illuminate the plight facing millions of refugee girls striving for an education. Narrated by acclaimed actors Tessa Thompson and David Oyelowo, the film launched globally on International Women's Day and serves at the heart of a campaign to galvanize action for gender equality, particularly those most at risk. And the facts are truly staggering, as you've heard from Elle and many others. Of the millions of people who are displaced globally, 17 million of them at least are girls, and the numbers increase. And for every 10 refugee boys in the classroom, there are fewer than 7 girls. And yet we know that educating a girl not only empowers her and provides her with a brighter, more successful future, it has exponentially positive ripple effects on her community, resulting in her having fewer and healthier children, a greater chance of those children being educated, and an increased likelihood of earning a higher wage that will reinvest in her family and her community. We have a responsibility to use our footprint at City in these over 100 countries to amplify issues that affect people across the world through our business and campaigns like this. In fact, we've had over 160 screenings of Brave Girl Rising across 61 countries just this past March, and the screenings continue. And as part of our global International Women's Day celebrations that continue all year long. And now you're part of this wonderful and powerful movement to impact long-term social change. So written by a refugee, acclaimed poet Warsan Shire, and performed by refugees, made in collaboration with refugees in one of the world's largest camps, Dadaab, Brave Girl Rising is a story about how hope, love, and friendship can propel us beyond even the bleakest of circumstances. And as another proud refugee, and on behalf of my colleagues at City, this is Brave Girl Rising.
Holly, I know that you represent a lot of people and a lot of great work that's being done by City all over the world. And we are thrilled to be able to have City as one of our award recipients today because professionally, I'm an investment broker, and it's rare that financial institutions get to be honored for doing good work in the world. So it's just a real pleasure personally and for our organization to be honoring City today. And I get that it's a very real heartwarming experience for yourself and very meaningful for you to be here today, given your life's path. So thank you very much. On behalf of the UN Association, I want to present to you a similar certificate of recognition to City on behalf of the Mayor's Office. That's for you and your people.
That's for the team.
For the team. I have one from the California State Assembly as well, from Richard Bloom's office, the 2019 Global Citizen Award Certificate of Recognition to City in recognition of the commitment to improving the lives of refugees in the face of a global and local migration crisis through significant contributions in creating a better world for all. On behalf of the 50th Assembly District of the State of California, acknowledgement is merited and hereby rendered with sincere congratulations and appreciation.
Thank you.
So that's for you as well. And from our people at the UNA USA Certificate of Recognition as well. On behalf of the UNA USA Southern California, we're honored to recognize your commitment to making a difference in the lives of refugees and those seeking economic and human rights, both locally and globally. Your contribution provides an example for others to emulate, and we thank you for making the world a better place for all people, refugees and migration, the global challenge and local impact, September 18th, 2019. So for your third hand, here you go. No, that's all right. I'll hold it. And you know what?
Can I get the city team?
Sure. How do we get the city team? Could James and Bob and others from the city team that would like to come forward as well? That would be great. You know what? How about having Marty Zog from the International Rescue Committee come forward as well? Marty? Where's Marty? There you go. Where did Marty go? Martin Zog, where'd he go? Oh, he did? All right, well, we'll get to him in a little bit. Okay, at this point, I would like to introduce a wonderful woman from our Orange County chapter, Joy Adams. Joy, are you here somewhere? There you are, there you are. Okay, great. Joy is a woman who, with a heart of gold, and has been an active participant in our Orange County chapter, also with the Orange County SCR, what do you call it? Not the SCRCO, the OC Regional Council of Organizations and other organizations in Orange County, a dear friend of ours and of the UNA, and Joy will be welcoming our Access California Services Global Citizen Award recipient. Joy?
Good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to introduce to you Nala Kayali. I've known Nala for about 8-9 years, and I have watched her serve the refugee community in Orange County like you just really can't believe. Access California is a health and human services nonprofit dedicated to enhancing the quality of life for underserved Arab American and Muslim American communities in Orange County. Their programs include health access in government programs and services in employment, citizenship, and immigration, mental health, refugee support, English as a second language, and client advocacy. That's a pretty full range of services to the refugee community. Nella's story is quite incredible. She came to the U.S. as a Palestinian refugee from Syria. She was 16 years old with a 9th grade education. Since she is now self-educated, and with the passion and determination, she created Access California in 1998 and has led that to an incredible expansion for services in the refugees. I just think that her accomplishments are almost impossible for a woman of her background. So it was with really a great admiration and respect that, that I am honored to know her. Nala's story, as I said, is really incredible. And not only has she created and led the Access California, she is the chairwoman of the Orange County Refugee Forum, which is a collaboration of services, government and private, that service the refugee community. And they get together and make sure that there is plenty of available resources for their growth and commitment to the community. She is also the State Refugee Forum's seat for the State Advisory Council on Refugee Assistance and Services and serves on national and international boards. She is a strong, really strong, involved in support in all the community in Orange County. And currently, she is also serving on the Executive Committee for Orange County Census 2020 to make sure that every person in Orange County is counted. So her incredible accomplishments have not been ignored. She has gone, and Access California have appeared in many newspapers, magazines, television, and radio shows, as well as numerous awards to the organization and to Nala personally. She has received recognition for her work from the White House, the U.S. House of Representatives and Department of Commerce, the California State Senate and State Assembly, the Orange County Board of Supervisors, and the Orange County Human Relations Council. In 2012, she was invited to breakfast with President Obama and his First Lady. In 2014, she was awarded the White House Champion of Change Award, and certainly she is a champion of change. Nala is an inspiration. She epitomizes what I think the SDGs are focusing on, local leaders with a global vision. She certainly has strong local leadership, but her mind at a global level. She believes immigrant and refugee communities deserve the opportunity to thrive as hardworking, diverse, skilled, and contributing citizens. So each year, since I first came to Access California, inviting them to participate in UNA Orange County as a member of our Council of Organizations, we have participated in the annual celebration of Refugee Day. And that day is really a celebration. Immigrants from Orange County leaderships that have immigrated and grown into full county leadership are honored, are highlighted, given an opportunity for people to see just what refugees do for our community. So it is indeed my pleasure, my honor, and my privilege to introduce Nala to you. Excuse me. I'm nervous, can you tell? So please help me welcome Nala.
Thank you, Joy. What you heard about my adulthood work, I want you to put the hat and just vision the naughty girl when I was young and advocate for the girls, the kids in the neighborhood if anybody would make fun of them. I'm a product of the refugee community. My family with refugees. I lived the refugee life in Syria, and to be honest with you, I hated the logo of United Nations. I went to UNRWA school, and that logo was on my pillow, my blanket, my backpack, my school supplies. I hated that logo. When they used to give us the school supplies the beginning of the year, I start selling those school supplies to the kids in the neighborhood so they can be like me. And now I am honored today to receive the award from the United Nations Association in Los Angeles. If it wasn't for that logo, I cannot be here, and that logo made me who I am and what I did for the underserved, immigrant, refugees, the marginalized community. So thank you, United Nations, for what you did to me. I went to 9th grade to the UNRWA school. And I had a great time. But I don't want anybody in my neighborhood to know that I go to those schools. But how much I learned and we experienced and how much they used to come and visit us to check on us, now I value what they did to us. So that symbol and that logo, it's very close to my heart. I want to thank the United Nations Association Southern California for honoring me today. And if it wasn't for Joy, Adam, that we've been together for many years, 8 or 9 years. And thank you, Barry, Simon, for awarding me, and I am honored. And I would like to thank my family, my parents, my children, my fellow friends at Access California Services. the board members, and the community we serve, they put me in this position when I opened the door. I struggled. I struggled in every way in my life. And when I started Access California Services, I was going through very difficult time in my life where I needed some help. And I had to seek services for therapy. And at that time, I felt the therapist did not understand who I am, did not understand my culture, did not understand where I belong. I changed therapists many times, and same thing, every time I would leave, crying. I decided to start an organization. I did not have the experience of starting a nonprofit. I borrowed a book from the library, How to Start a Nonprofit in California. Did not have the experience. I don't have the mental health experience. I don't have the social work experience. I only finished 9th grade. But I was an advocate, and I said, where other people go, I needed to start. I did start with a folding table, folding chair, 2 folding chairs, one for me, one for the client, and a milk crate to put the files and borrowed phone. And next to that phone is the answering machine. If you remember those days, the answering machine next to the phone. I kept that table and chair. They're in my office. I invite you all to come and visit and see that table. And a lady believed in my vision, gave me $2,000 to start the organization. Today, we are 40 staff. Our budget is close to $2 million. That I used to invite myself to meetings, and I would take my chair with me and squeeze it inside, and I have a voice, and I always talk. And I say my community underserved, and we need services. We receive funding from federal, state, county, foundations, banks, businesses, individuals. I don't take no for an answer. Thank you, Mike, for being here. He believed in me when I said, take us as from the healthcare agency to get the health assessment program. People, they said, you don't have a clinic. I said, I'll find a way to get it. And we were the recipient to do the health assessment for refugees in Orange County. I heard a need assessment at that time. I did not know the language of a nonprofit. But how we grow the organization, we had to receive a funding from First Five to do need assessment. What the community asked us to do and what the need, we start adding programs. We start collaborating. A lot of organizations, they make fun of me. Whenever they hear collaboration, they say, collaborate with Nahla, she'll say yes. And I would say yes. Any collaboration, it's always great for the community. It's a win-win situation. We have collaborations and programs is running with no funding at Access, but because we collaborate. If you really believe in something, you don't do it with money. You just do it, and people will come, and they'll hold hands with you, and they'll do it. We have 96 students in our ESL classes. We have computer classes. We have mental health program department. We have immigration services. We have case managers. We have 22 case managers who are providing services to the elderly, to the young, to the students, to anybody. We have 16 languages in our office. We provide wraparound services, and I can say we're very, very successful. And the team at Access, they make it happen. Each and every staff at Access or a volunteer, they come very happy in the morning, and I assure you that. And I always tell them, tell me the day when they start with us, tell me the day that you're going to be dreaming about Access. In 1 week, 2 weeks, they come back, they say, we were dreaming at night about Access California services. Each and every staff member, they provide the services and they want to be there. Say yes if you believe in that. They're here with me today. They provide amazing services. Our slogan is preserving dignity, enriching lives. We believe every person on earth, every person, they deserve a dignified life. Do you agree with me? Yes. And that's what we do. We provide services and we make sure our door is open to everyone. If it wasn't for the community, they start coming, we won't be here today. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for our client who really believed in the organization, the staff, the board, and everybody. Thank you.
Can
Joy be here?
Yeah, Joy, could you come back up, please? Joy? So first of all, on behalf of well, I'll wait till Joy gets up here as well. Why don't you be on the other side of
And perceive it.
Okay. Okay, first of all, I'd like to present you with our Sustainable Development Goal pin, representing the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Nala?
Oh, thank you.
And then Joy, you would like to present the award from the mayor?
This is from the mayor.
Hold on.
The City of Los Angeles Certificate of Recognition is hereby presented to Nala Kayali. As mayor of the City of Los Angeles, on behalf of its residents, it is my pleasure to congratulate you on receiving the 2019 Global Citizens Award of the United Nations Association, USA, Southern California Division, with 12th Annual West Coast Global Forum, Refugee and Migration, the Global Challenge and the Local Impact. Because of your hard work, the Arab American and Muslim American communities have access to direct health and human services through Access California Services. The city and I look forward to seeing your future achievements that undoubtedly will have a lasting effect. Signed, Eric Garcetti.
Thank you. Actually, he's one of my favorite mayors.
And on behalf of the UNA USA, our certificate of recognition, thank you very much, Nala, for the road you've traveled, the surviving that you've done, and the success that you're experiencing with Access California Services.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And finally, from Assemblyman Richard Bloom, on behalf of the California Assembly, certificate of recognition for in recognition of your commitment to improving the lives of refugees facing a global and local migration crisis through significant contributions in creating a better world for all. So that's for you as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Joy, you want to help the whole thing?
Thank you.
Okay. Let's go this way a little bit, get a photo op here.
ask my team to be with me here?
Sure.
Come on.
Have her team can come forward real quick.
Come on, Farah. Orange County Refugee Forum, please.
What do you want to hold that? Quick.
Come on, Mike.
Come on, right over here. Go on the other side.
Quick. And move in. We're trying to center it with the screen. Okay. Yeah, you're all right. You're okay. Great, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
So honored to receive it.
I know, I got it.
One of the best.
Thank you very much. Comments? Great. Nala, could you come back up, please? Okay, I would now like to introduce Judith Harris and Mel Boynton, who will be introducing our great friend Gillian Sorensen. Judith Harris is a longtime UNA member, past president of the Pasadena chapter, past president of the Southern California division, and also currently serves on the National Council for the UNA USA, I believe National Council Secretary. I think that's right, Judith, right? And Mel Boynton, past president of the Pomona Valley chapter, past president of the Southern California division, and former and I think current National Council Advocacy Chair. And so they will be introducing Gillian Sorensen. So Mel and Judith, if you guys would please come forward. Thank you. Please welcome them. Thanks, Barry.
Thank you, Barry. As a 70-year summer resident of Michigan, I'm proud to acknowledge that our guest, Gillian Sorensen, grew up in Michigan, graduated from Smith College, and studied at the Sorbonne. She spent over 30 years talking the talk and walking the walk for international solutions to the human rights issues of our age. This includes 12 years as the New York City Commissioner for the United Nations, supporting the largest diplomatic community in the world, 4 years as public policy advisor to Secretary General Boutros Ghali, 6 years as Assistant Secretary General for External Relations to Secretary General Kofi Annan, and 11 years as the United Nations Foundation Senior Advisor and National Advocate on matters relating to the UN and the U.S. relationship. Widow of Theodore Sorensen, President John Kennedy's speechwriter and special counsel, Gillian has a special gift with inspiring citizens to action. She has spoken to and inspired hundreds and hundreds of UNA USA gatherings. I think that's the first time I met her some 15 years ago. And hundreds of thousands of members and friends all across our country. Her commitment to a better world knows no limits, as she is still a life member of the UNA USA, active as a board member of the International Rescue Committee, and member of the Council on Foreign Relations.
Gillian, we are honored by your presence here today with us. In addition to what Mel said, Gillian Sorensen is the most generous person I have ever known, sharing her wisdom and experience and supporting UNA chapters in so many ways. I met her at a UNA Pasadena UN Day 18 years ago, and I still remember her eloquent speech. She has spoken numerous times in Pasadena at UNA annual meetings, at the United Nations, at our Global Engagement Summit, and at our Global Leadership Summits. She has been an inspiration and role model for all of us, living the ideals of the United Nations by example, giving generously to us and to the world, with respect and gratitude from all of us.
Well, what an amazing afternoon this is. So much inspiration, so many distinguished people, leaders doing great work. It really lifts my spirit to be here with you. I flew from New York yesterday to join you. And Mel, you are right. I have crossed the country more than a few times to speak with United Nations associations and with Rotary clubs and World Affairs councils and military groups, including West Point and the Air Force Academy, and women's groups and faith groups and students and seniors and more people, more audiences of every size and every type than you can imagine. But I have to say that whenever I come to a United Nations association, I know that whatever our differences in background or professions, that I am among kindred spirits, that even before we have met, we are connected. I began my UN career a long time ago with a deep and abiding conviction, and that is that the United Nations matters and that we need to say so loud and clear, that it is a unique and valuable instrument, imperfect but indispensable, that it serves our national interest as well as the global interest, and that when the United States is fully committed, visible, and engaged, the chance of success is always greater, and that true success requires broad and deep public support, especially from UNAs around the world and from the World Federation around the world as well. Well, it's been a fascinating journey for me. More stories than time allows today. But I feel very fortunate that I found my place, and not just my job, but my mission with the United Nations. And I cannot imagine any place I would rather be. To me, the UN is the embodiment of hope and the place where idealism and realism meet. So there have been many acts, several acts through the course of this career, but when I worked for Kofi Annan, first with him as a colleague, and then of course he became Secretary General, he and I talked at some length about my conviction that here in the United States we needed deeper and more informed public support. Of course, over the years with Republican presidents and Democratic presidents, the US and the UN had had a sort of an up and down relationship, and that's normal. But I did believe if the public support was committed and fully understanding that would make a great difference. And Kofi Annan agreed. And he charged me to travel out and to become not just in-house, I mean, I had a desk job, but also on the road, be mediator and interpreter and moderator and debater and consensus builder and spokesman and advocate. Now, most of the time, I was speaking to friendly audiences, but not always. And I had to sort of get accustomed to taking the critiques and the questions, of course, and sometimes the attacks. I remember quite clearly the period of time when it was very adversarial, and that was around the start of the Iraq War. Does anybody remember that? And there were deep differences of view across the country. And on more than a couple of occasions, members of the audience would engage me sharply with what the UN was saying or doing at that time. And there was one other occasion going back to Michigan when, to my surprise, the self-appointed Michigan militia showed up wearing camouflage, big guys, 6 foot plus like this, and they never sat down. They stood at the back with this very macho and intimidating pose. And they didn't say a word until the Q&A, and finally one of them put up his hand, and I called on him. And he didn't have a question. What he had was basically a rant about how the UN was a threat to our sovereignty. I'm sure you've heard that somewhere around. It's still out there. But there's an answer to that. And while I may not have convinced the Michigan militia, I had the feeling that the entire rest of the audience was right here in the palm of my hand. Those are some of the audiences we need to reach out to open our circle, to engage this debate, and not to be afraid or averse to taking on the critics. Well, then, thanks to the UN Foundation, they gave me a further chance to be a national advocate and to continue these travels. I spoke to 22,000 Rotarians at the Rotary International meeting in Bangkok and to other huge model UNs, a couple of thousand students at a time, always an inspiration to me. I traveled from Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon, and Missoula, Montana to Birmingham, Alabama, and to all of these different groups. It was, for me, always interesting, and answering questions, of course, and trying to earn trust, respect, and credibility for the United Nations. I have always been struck by the power of words. And I have an uneasy feeling that people in Washington don't understand that right now. By the power of words, not just to inform, but to inspire, to unite, to lift us, to give us hope and bring us together. And don't we know that in the United Nations, our weapon is words? And the best diplomats of all are those who can engage those debates and listen well and put themselves in the others' shoes. So I want to thank all of you. First, our United Nations officials, Barry and Mel and Judith and all of you who have worked so hard over the years, but also the many groups represented here who respect UN work and who join with us in our commitment to the situation of refugees. In my closing words, I'll focus on that for just a minute. When I came to the end of my UN career, I asked myself, as everyone must, what next? Where do I go? How do I have a next stage, a next act, if you want to call it that is meaningful, that draws on my experience in some way? I had 1 year as a Harvard fellow, which gave me a little time to ponder this. But when I came back, I was very lucky to have been nominated to the board of the International Rescue Committee, just about the time that David Miliband became its president. And I don't know if he's still there, but I salute your director of IRC out here in California. It has been, for me, the most important commitment I could possibly make. I won't repeat the statistics that we've all heard today. We know without doubt that the refugee situation is the most daunting humanitarian crisis of our day. And it is not going to be over soon. Now, somebody said I was some kind of idealist or something. I don't care about that term. What I care about is the human connection, the compassion that reminds us when we say 75 million, we're not talking about numbers. These are human beings. These are families. These are women, men, women, children like us. I've traveled now twice to the front lines, last summer to Thailand and Malaysia, and just this June to Jordan and Lebanon. As we noted earlier, in Lebanon, there are nearly 2 million refugees, in Jordan close to that number, both rather small countries. To see a refugee camp with 100,000 refugees living in tents, it's fairly orderly, lines of tents about 12 feet square. In that 12-foot square tent, maybe 8 people living. Very few adult men, because most of them are either dead or, as they often say, with tears in their eyes, disappeared. I had a lengthy conversation with one woman who said that her husband had opened their door on pounding and ordering to open up and been shot dead before her eyes. And that her older son had already been, they said recruited, but she called it kidnapped, into some rogue military, that her younger son was approaching 13 and she was afraid that his destiny would be the same, and that her 11-year-old daughter was just coming to the age where she would be seized and forced into either prostitution or a child marriage. Now I ask you, if this were your family, what would you do? Most of the houses in her small town had been demolished. She was literate, but she had never worked at a regular job. But she decided that she had to flee for the lives of her children as well as herself. And therefore she found herself, after a harrowing journey, in a tent in Lebanon, in this case, Jordan. With IRC's help and the work of the UN Refugee Commission and others like Save the Children, which I'm sure you've heard of, CARE and Mercy Corps, those were the others that I ran into, and they cooperate quite well among them. We're doing everything we can, and refugees are not in those cases being starved, but they are not free. They are not free to leave the camps. They are not free to go out and seek a job. They are not free to move about, a freedom that you and I take for granted. They are effectively imprisoned with no ability to be self-reliant within the refugee camp. They said with pride, I'm Syrian. I have been Syrian for generations. But they don't have the ability to go back because there's nothing to go back to. So they're in this kind of limbo, no state, often no papers, as they always say, passports and such, no ability to travel out and so on. It is just a harrowing situation. I do believe that the work that IRC is and the others are doing is very, very important in saving lives and changing lives and counseling on trauma and loss and legal options and such. But what IRC can't do is address the larger issue. Why do we have these floods of refugees? What is the cause of that conflict? Why is Assad bombing his own people to that extent? And why has the refugee crisis spread to every continent? To Africa, to Southeast Asia, to Central America, even to South America with Venezuela now, and of course to the Middle East. Why is there so much conflict? Where is the enlightened leadership? Where is the compassionate leadership, the inclusive leadership that helps their people understand that we are all human, and that if we live together with some measure of respect, that we can all thrive? And beyond that, as has been mentioned, is the climate issue. Many times I heard about drought, especially when I was in Southeast Asia. Literally drought, no rain, no water, and therefore no crops, no food, no ability to draw water from the ground. And then where do you go? Do you starve on site, or do you do your best to find some other place to go? After each of these trips, I came home really almost overwhelmed with the courage that they have to muster to survive, and committed somehow to try to find ways that we can do better. I'm so moved by what happens in Southern California. You embody the kind of empathetic reception and leadership that the world needs. And you know, I don't need to tell you what a contribution refugees have made to your communities. The drive, the creativity, the commitment to build new businesses and new efforts and so on. I have, somewhere in these notes here, I have a list of famous refugees. Just to start, we wouldn't have had Henry Kissinger or Madeleine Albright if we had no refugees here, and so many others. But I just think we need to multiply ourselves. And with our neighbors and our cousins and other relatives and people who resist this, we have to persuade them. and with an administration, and in particular, forgive me for saying, a president who dismisses and disparages refugees as if they are the dregs, as if they are all terrible people, rapists and murderers, as he likes to say. How terrible is that coming from the leader of our country? We cannot live with that beyond next year, November. We need someone, and we can have differences of views, but we need someone who can recognize what a precious and invaluable contribution to our country immigrants and refugees have been. And let me add, unless you are a Native American, every one of us comes from an immigrant and refugee background. Whether it's one generation or 9 generations back, we all came from somewhere else, and our parents and grandparents, and they all set off into the great unknown, hoping to make a life, to live in peace, to make a contribution, to have health and safety so their family could thrive. So in that, just let me say, I'm honored to be here with you, to join with you first as part of a life member, indeed, of the United Nations Association, and also through my work on the IRC to join with all of you who have also committed to and welcomed the refugees to this community. Thank you again.
Gillian, on behalf of Mel and Judith and all of us, we want to present you with her certificate of acknowledgement and recognition from the mayor's office.
Thank you, thank you. Oh, beautiful.
Also from the California State Assembly, from Assemblyman Richard Bloom. Thank you very much for being here and being a difference maker in the world. From the UN Association. Selves.
Great.
Okay.
Look at
Judith,
that.
you want to hold that for her, baby?
No, I think she wants that.
Right. Okay. We have a. Did you have an envelope?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We'll take care of it in a minute. Marty Zog, would you please come forward as well on behalf of the International Rescue Committee? Gillian, as a board member of the IRC, is presenting her part of her award to the International Rescue Committee, as well as City's contribution. City doesn't need the little bit of cash infusion, but the IRC, I'm sure, can put it to good use. So on behalf of City as well, I want to recognize International Rescue Committee for its work and present that to Marty Zog on our behalf. So Marty, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay. So please recognize Gillian Sorensen, years of UN work, UNA membership and service to the world, and to the International Rescue Committee as well. Thank you, Marty. Hold on, it's a quick photo. Quick photo, stay up here. Stay up for a quick photo. We're only running about an hour and a half behind track. A little bit to the left, a little bit to the left. That's right, that's right. Please welcome back El Frisson to moderate our panel, and we'll take about We'll take about 25 minutes or so for our panel. We'll have about 15, 20 minutes of the panel itself sharing, and then we'll come back out and get audience comments and questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. I'm quite honored to be with you here on this panel. When Barry first told me, when Barry first asked me to moderate the panel, and he said that UNA is awarding 3 women, I applauded him for doing so. The gender gap in recognizing women leadership is great, and even if we continue to recognize women only for the next 20 years, we would not be anywhere near closing half of that gender gap. So without further ado, I want to jump into the questions right away. And since you spoke last, Gillian, I wanted to ask you, you talked about refugees in camps. What is your experience with refugees in urban settings? And what are their conditions? What are the challenges that they face? And I may, if I may ask that we do our answers 3 minutes at a time so that we can go over a few of the questions that were prepared.
Yes, well, I did refer to the camps. The ones I have seen, both in Southeast Asia and in the Middle East, were quite orderly and organized, although there wasn't a blade of grass or anything of that kind. The tents were just tents. There was no privacy. There were no separate rooms. There were no bathrooms. So it was as basic could be. There was no heat for the cold winters, and certainly no cooling for the hot summers. At minimum, it was a tent over their heads. But you're quite correct. Not every refugee is in a refugee camp. In Lebanon, and you may know more about this, most of them had filtered into the cities. They were, they were living more or less on their own. Some were connected to refugee organizations, some were not. They were simply struggling to do what they could. Some were professionals who'd had a business or been a teacher or whatever, and there they were selling matchsticks on the street corner. It was very hard to find regular jobs. They were instantly identified as refugees, and that ruled them out of what you would call serious professional jobs. In Southeast Asia, it was even more difficult. By their accent or by their belonging to either the Rohingya or the Karen, K-A-R-E-N, ethnic groups, they were simply, it was out of bounds that they would take really any job other than selling a bottle of water on the street. So the camps are, when they have them, I think, are helpful because it allows the supportive agencies to be there to offer assistance, counseling, healthcare, and maybe some elementary education. But even if you put all that the UN Refugee Commission, the IRC, Mercy Corps, CARE, Save the Children, Catholic Relief Service, if they, even all together, they cannot meet the need. So some refugees are simply floating with little or no help at all. It's as difficult as you can possibly imagine.
Thank you. Nahla, my question to you draws on your experience in Southern California. What are the common resettlement struggles that the refugees have when they arrive here in Southern California? And how does Access California work with refugee population to remedy these resettlement struggles?
Actually, refugees, they come with high hopes that the next day that they're going to be finding a job.
No, just get it closer.
The next day they will be finding a job, they will be housing, and they'll move on. Of course, it's very difficult at the beginning. The acculturation is really hard, and immediately they join the American people with housing crisis. It's the housing crisis for all refugees. Rent is very high, and they cannot really afford the housing unless they get some support from different organizations like Access California Services, like all the organizations they joined the Refugee Forum, that we can be able to help them with the rent. Refugees are very hard-working community, and they come and it's in their heart and their mind, they want to make it. And I serve on a couple of boards for the homeless population, and I assure you none of the, in Orange County, I can talk about Orange County, none of the refugees become homeless. They're very hard-working people, and they just want to make it.
Thank you. Halle, how has Citi's global footprint informed your work locally around immigration? I have to say that I was pretty moved by your story and how you build it up, and I have a feeling that you had something to do with that vision.
Thank you. I wish I could take credit for that, but really it's the amazing City Community Development team led by Bob Anibale, James Alva, Laura Peralta, and the whole team. And, I think I am, first of all, thank you, Elle, for this great honor. And to be here among all of you, I'm humbled by the work that you do and truly inspired. I'm, as someone who has just completed 17 years at City, I'm very proud of the work that every day City is doing in our global and local communities. So, we are spread out. We're the world's global bank. We are spread out over 160 countries and jurisdictions. As I mentioned earlier, many of them are areas where people are displaced. We come to work every day, and we think about two things above all. We think about how we are adding value to the communities that we serve, and how are we upholding the values of, as corporate citizens, that we've committed to serve. Our mission is enabling economic growth and progress, and so with that, when we bring it down to a local level, our team here has a great track record of working in partnership with municipalities to identify situations where they can be impactful. One of the areas that Linda Lopez mentioned is Cities for Citizenship. That's a program that was done in partnership with the mayor's office, with the critical leadership of Linda herself, along with the mayors of New York and Chicago. And it provides an opportunity to immigrants who are eligible to become citizens, permanent residents, of which there are 8 million in the US, eligible to become citizens, to go through a program where they can accelerate the citizenship and become, and through that, improve their financial outlook. With that, be able to improve their income as almost as much as 11%, have access to academic scholarships that we all take for granted, and to better their lives. There's a lovely woman, Rafaela, who has been in this country for 15 years. She was born in El Salvador, and Rafaela has long dreamt of being a citizen. She was eligible but didn't know how to apply for citizenship and how to go through that work. And through the Cities for Citizenship program, which is offered through the IRC, she took classes at her local library, and today she's a citizen. It's 2 years now, and is doing better. She has improved her income and is saving money for a home. So we like to help with financial inclusion and ensuring the American dream is alive and well.
That's great. Thank you for your work on that. So as you all know, the U.S. Supreme Court left the future of the U.S. asylum system uncertain last week by allowing the Trump administration to proceed with its plan to bar most asylum seekers at the southern border, while a lawsuit over the rule makes its way through the courts. The justice's decision effectively reinstated a Trump administration rule that prevents migrants from applying for asylum if they pass through another country other than their own before arriving to the U.S. That means that asylum seekers from any country but Mexico or Canada will now be ineligible for asylum if they show up at the southern or northern border. So Gillian, this would reduce admission cutting back a decades-old program. And I know that IRC was at the forefront of advocating for these programs. What is the consequence of that?
It's hard to imagine the consequence. If we make it nigh impossible for people to get asylum or to move through a logical process, if we have no refugees coming in to this country to renew our needs of employment and creative endeavor of every kind, I think we are a changed country. And it's a profound loss to the country that we are. We have been for 100 years the role model for a country, imperfect as we are, but a country that welcomes refugees, that has a process for bringing them in. Obviously, we don't throw our doors wide open and say, everybody come. There is a process. It's important to follow that and to make it clear. But I feel as though every obstacle imaginable is being put up to make it impossible to come in. We have employment needs. We have opportunity. We're a big country. We're only 330 million people in an enormous landmass. Germany, a fraction the size of the US, took in 800,000 refugees over the last couple of years. Others, like Sweden and others, have done very well. Everybody has to deal with some of the local reaction to that. But I think the United States could and should do much more and much better, and it would be to the benefit of our country in the long term. My view is that refugees are not a burden. They are indeed a benefit and an opportunity. And for many years, almost as long as I remember, we were taking in roughly 100,000 a year. Then suddenly we had that precipitous drop a couple of years ago. They said 40, but it turned out really to be 25 or so. Now they're saying 20 or so, but it's turning out to be barely a few thousand, which is nothing. We need to speak up loud and clear. And most of us are not politicians, but you have some good members of Congress, and we have voices. We have articulate voices that can write and speak and certainly can vote. And we need to make sure that Washington hears us.
That is certainly a call for action. So, Nahla, how can we as a community be proactive in changing this narrative around refugees and immigrants? And as you know, both Arabs most times, mistaken to terrorists. Like, how do we change that narrative?
So you're one of them?
Well, I am, I guess.
Well, we need to keep repeating ourselves. Immigrants and refugees are making America great.
Yes.
And each and every one, just like my friend said, somehow they came from somewhere from the world. So we really need to keep repeating and talking about the refugees and their success stories. And we have, actually, I chaired the Refugee Forum. If one of my friends bring the poster from the Orange County Refugee Forum from the table, how refugees, they really made the world better. of so many famous refugees became public officials, board of supervisors, mayors, city managers, and they are in technology. So we are really lifting up the world, and we're taking part of that. So we really need to keep talking about the success of refugees and immigrants, and our stories needs to be taught with that how we came to this country and we become a contributing citizen. Thank you.
Hale, you talked about the City for Citizenship program, which is a great program. I think it helps a lot with integration. What is your next vision? What are other programs that you have in mind that you want to do around immigration issues?
Sure. First, if I can add to what Nahla said, it's so important that we do speak up, because this was the first time in a public setting I've actually said I'm a political asylee. And I don't think anyone at my work ever knew that. So
it takes courage. Thank you for sharing.
no, and it's not anything to obviously be ashamed of. It is a part of my past, and it was an important part of my assimilation into this country, and it makes me who I am today. But it is being received in this country the way I was 30-some years ago, and being integrated into this country. And that is what Citi is doing for others today. So as a financial institution, financial inclusion is a very important part of what we do. Providing access to financial products and services for immigrants is imperative, for refugees and immigrants is imperative, because it allows them to integrate, to build a financial identity, and to be able to be part of this society and avoid homelessness, as you said. So building their financial past. One of the programs we're very proud of, also Linda mentioned, which is the Ventanilla Financiera. That was done, as Linda mentioned, in conjunction and in partnership with 48 Mexican consulates around the world, around the country, and it is the largest population of foreign citizenship is the Mexican population. And Los Angeles is the home to the largest Mexican immigrants. So it is very important that through the Financiera, we provide access through the catalytic support of City Community Development, who's provided over $5 million to this program in partnership with other nonprofits and municipalities, to provide the financial coaching that immigrants and refugees need in order to have access. They need the access resources to be able to integrate and build a secure, stable future for their lives. I know I talked about Rafaela. I have to close with a gentleman named Hector, who is a restaurant worker in Los Angeles. Been in this country for many years, never thought about struggling financially, never thought about how to apply for social services. He happened to be at the Mexican consulate offices on the day when they were presenting the Ventanilla program, and he overheard it. That day, he signed up for financial coaching. He signed up for a savings account, and he is able to set money aside for his family, for his children. He learned that he could have access to earned income tax credits, a very valuable cash infusion that is necessary for low-income individuals. So through that, he's been able to improve his life, and today 2 years in, he's still using the services. He gets his taxes prepared for free of charge, and is still picking up his earned income tax credits. So we're very proud of that work and very proud of our mission of financial inclusion.
This is very important. Financial independence helps immigrants and refugees become, mobile in the economy. I remember when I first arrived here, you arrive and you have to hit the ground running, and there's no one who's going to give you information. You have to find it out. There's a lot of disinformation. I remember paying a lot of taxes the first year that I should not have paid because I did not know how to fill out my forms properly. And so this is a very important program, and I hope that it's replicated around the world. I hope that this California experience with Citi is also,
It's a
used around the
national,
world.
it's a national program, and it is so important because, like you said, trust is a main factor, and there are a lot of perceived barriers, real or perceived. There's language barrier, there's cultural barriers, and there's trust issues. You don't know who to trust. So this is a very trusted environment and a way to access resources. Of course, you do the same in community.
I would like to open the floor for questions for our panelists.
So questions or comments we'll start over here with Barbara Mueller.
You know, you outlined a very big problem. And the only way you can solve a big problem is with a big solution. So how can we step aside from the political scene? And how can we become powerful enough to take care of this problem, which makes us all so sad? We're family people. We want to make this world one huge, happy family. Gillian, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate the effort that both of you have brought to us, all of you have brought to us. But now I was thinking all these abandoned shopping malls should be immigrants, homes for the immigrants and for the refugees, and put those people to work. And so how do we sidestep the political situation so we can become part of the solution?
Try to keep your answers brief, so we can get to as many comments as possible.
I'm going to take a first crack at this and say, I actually don't see it as a problem. The number of people that are moving around the world is so little. There is place for everyone. It's just a matter of racism, quite frankly. If those were white European refugees, we would welcome them. But the problem is we are so afraid of brown people in this country. And not here, also in Europe. That was the backlash. 0.38% of the global population is not a problem. We can solve it. We have the resources and the means to solve it.
I would just add that politics is everywhere. We can't just say we'll do it without politics. We need the support of political leaders, whether it's local, national, or international. In the international connection, why does Washington not understand? We can do more together than we can do alone. And this notion of America first, to me, means America isolated. We can join forces with other countries in making some comprehensive refugee efforts. But you're right, it's barely a percentage of overall refugees who will be resettled. Most of them are going to have to figure out their lives from where they are or in the near or neighboring countries where they are right now. So enlightened leadership, visionary, compassionate, how do I turn it on? You can have mine.
We ready for the next question?
Compassionate and visionary leadership are what's needed here and abroad.
Great. Over here, over here.
Thank you, Barry. Ike Kabisani, President, United Nations Association in Empire. Wonderful presentation. I have been associated with many humanitarian organizations, including United Nations Association, for over 30 years or 35 years. And I have traveled all those troubled areas which you just mentioned in South Asia or Southeast Asia, Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. The things which you have been mentioned is refugees, which are refugees in other countries, and they are in great need and great danger, and whatever they are missing in their lives, you have narrated very well. I have been to some places where I have seen internally displaced people who have nothing of whatsoever. At least refugees have something, and internally displaced people have nothing, from Rohingya to Syria to Central Africa or any other place you mentioned. What I'm trying to ask you is, what is needed to be done to end this conflict where these situations erupt and people have to leave their homes? What we as individuals and communities need to do in a very, very strong way. My straight question is to Gillian Sorensen, and maybe somebody else, maybe Elian can also shed some lights.
Well, why is it people forget the past? Hungary, for instance, I'll take one example, has now slammed the door on refugees. When I was a very young girl, Hungarian refugees came to my town in Michigan. Mel, do you remember that? We all have the potential to be refugees. And I can't understand how we've developed these leaders who simply have no sympathy, no understanding, and who don't make the effort to lift and enlighten their own population. It's not easy. We need to make some room. We need to be generous with our contributions. We need to teach people from a very young age that refugees are a boon to us all. And for those of us here, I want to mention one other thing. It's how we decide where we contribute. I'm sure you've heard of the Buffett Pledge. Well, that's for billionaires. It's a different universe. But the notion is that when you've taken care of your family and yourself, done what you need to do, what remains? Does X remain, X dollars? And of that sum, can you identify 50% of it that you will give away in your lifetime? That is now to give to the causes, the crises that are most important to you. Now, before it all goes to Uncle Sam and taxes, and now while we're on this earth, to identify where that can really make a difference and have the satisfaction of seeing that happen. This is simply to say, let's all try to be more generous with our own contributions to the extent we can.
I would like to say, vote for candidates that work for peace and solutions and actually don't compromise our global leadership. That's number one. We all can be part of that solution. And the second thing, on the more local level, and I'm a big advocate of local solutions as a previous local government official, we need to start engaging our local governments about community-based visas. These programs that allow to support communities that need people. We have so many towns that are empty that need people. And then maybe those local governments can engage with the federal government to create that kind of programming that allows us to tap into other areas of possibilities to bring in people into the United States and everywhere else, really.
I can add to that we really need to start from home. Just work around your city, your schools, and be active and advocate for the refugees and immigrants locally, and that will become a national movement. But we have to start from our own
city.
Thank you. You know, just to throw in a comment here, when I was in college back in the 1800s, actually there was something called the Vietnam War, and there was a draft. And college campuses were alive with protests and concerned students that were knocking on doors or holding sit-ins to change the direction of the politics of the day. And they succeeded in ending that war finally. And I'm just honored that we have a batch of students. I don't know about batch, it's not the best word. We have a great group of students from Cal State University Channel Islands here. I want to thank the professor and the students for making the trip down because, yeah, go ahead, give them applause. Yes, we all need to vote, as Elle said. And we are not going to resolve or solve the problem today, Ike, unfortunately. I wish I had that power, or I know you all wish you had that power to resolve it today. But to have students that are engaged in making a difference on the campus, and to know that there might be some piece of that going on other campuses around the world, hopefully the 18 to 21-year-olds can percolate that up and convince their parents that those kids need to vote, their parents need to vote. I don't think any friends or relatives in what I'll call a red state. But if you do, we have a responsibility to contact those people and make sure that they vote, and that they vote in a way that reflects American values, not blue values, not red values. Nobody has an ownership of family values. You know, right now, in my opinion, we are not reflecting the values that this country was founded upon. And we have a responsibility as human beings, as citizens of the world, to see to it that our brothers and sisters, wherever they are treated with respect and dignity. And in communication, anything can be worked out. The authenticity of our panelists and our speakers today represents the possibility of a world that can work for everyone. So, I just want to kind of throw that in there. There was a comment from David Miliband, the president of the International Rescue Committee, that as the numbers, he went on to say, instead of pursuing accountability for war crimes and investing in peace building, we're trapped in an age of impunity that is placing civilians as well as humanitarians in the crossfire and driving thousands from their homes every day. Those people, their only chance is really us and people that are like you out there in the world standing for a world that can work for everyone with no one left behind. So we'll have time for maybe one more comment or question from the audience, and we'll go right over here.
Thank you, Barry. I'm Dr. Wendy Rashidi, Artie Rashidi's wife. I want to shout out a hello to Gillian. Thank you so much for your long years of service and the many occasions we've had good meetings together. I'm reflecting a little bit on Barry's comment that, the youth are our future, and I just wonder if the panel could highlight some of the great programs that steer youth in the direction that we'd like to see go, with a more united world and a more caring world. I think that students who have been outside the United States, have been involved in a mission, been involved in modeled UN, any of these kind of programs help open the doors and open the eyes of our youth to the possibilities that we saw many years ago when the UNA was founded. This was a wonderful vision that we've carried forward to this point, but let's hope we can carry it further with bringing in more youth, and those of us who have been involved and can make contributions to support those youth, I would encourage that as well.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. Is there a burning, not a burning, but a
Yes.
1 minute comment from each of you on the panel, and then I'll share some other comments? Thank you.
We sponsored a program with the students for at Access California Services for college students. They must be refugees or asylees, where they start receiving scholarships. And we have students who, they were part of our youth group. They entered big universities and they received scholarships from from us through the program that it was sponsored by refugee students. They are at UCI, UCLA, Stanford, and they were all came less than 3 years, and they were accepted in big schools.
Great, great.
Thank you.
I'm a big supporter of study abroad, whether it's in high school or college, and that doesn't mean 2 weeks in Cancun. It really means living overseas for at least a semester, better yet a year, so you master another language. I also am a big supporter of service in the Peace Corps, which opens you to this whole situation. And of course to teaching in schools, in history, in social sciences, what this circumstance really is and why it matters.
I would like to add to that, also encouraging dual immersion language programs at our schools. When we learn another language, our mind is open to the world. We understand new cultures. It really enriches us as a human being. All of us here are multilingual, and we can attest to that. And I would also say, as a lifelong volunteer, volunteering really transforms people, and it does something to you that not only it changes you, but it becomes so contagious, and you see the ripple effect. So paying it forward, volunteering, I know we're doing a lot of that at USC, and I hope that other schools join us in that effort.
I would just quickly add that at City we have, through the foundation, a program called Pathways to Progress, and it is aimed for at underserved youth, and that is a way, again, to provide job opportunity, job training opportunity to our underserved communities in order to integrate them into the mainstream community. And our people, our employees, volunteer hundreds of hours of financial education and jobs training in order to execute that program very well. And it's a global program, not just a national program.
Great, great. So just a couple things. We're going to have a little advocacy moment here in a moment. Mel, if you want to prepare for that for a moment. I want to say that how many tables wrote something on that form that you were given earlier about ideas and suggestions and promises? Ginny, where's Ginny? Can you collect those, Ginny? If you have one, just hold it up, and Ginny will come by in the next few moments and collect those. And for the sake of time, what we're going to do is we're going to collect those. Our committee's going to select a winner, and for all of those of you who attended, we're going to send an email with a notice of the ideas that were suggested for actions. And so the winner of that will get our award. We'll send it to the winner, but for the sake of time, we're going to move on with that for the moment. Let's see here. Some of the actions that were suggested, I'm sure, to vote, to call friends and relatives in other states, writing letters to the editors. Before we do an advocacy moment, I want to thank our Connect, who provided live streaming today. If you're watching from somewhere in the world, thank you very much for tuning in to our global forum today. I want to thank Kent and Connect for that live streaming that he's providing today. To all the sponsors, City, the Santa Barbara chapter of UNA, all the chapters of UNA, our VIP sponsors, we thank you very much for that. PACE, we thank PACE and all the other sponsors. I'm not going to mention them all right now, but we thank you for that. For those of you who are wanting to avoid a little bit of traffic, you're all invited to join us for a casual happy hour at the train station. What's the name of the?
International Western Brewery.
The International Western Brewery has a happy hour. We're going to walk over there. It's just 2 blocks away. So for anyone here that would like to join Gillian and Geordie and have a few more casual, little bit more casual time, you're all welcome to walk 2 blocks over to the Union Station for that. Mel, before I complete, would you like to do a little 3 to 5 minute advocacy?
You bet. You know, we sometimes get the feeling that we're all by ourselves. Well, the Better World campaign, Geordie's outfit, has surveyed each year. And would anyone like to guess what percentage of Americans support an active role in the United Nations by the United States? Say it. 91. That's good. Any others? 35? 85. Well, you're right around the right number. 69% of Republicans, 96% of Democrats, 84% of independents. You have people that know in their heart that the UN matters, that the issues the UN is facing matters. And you can express your support for the UN by 3 measures. You can give to the worthy causes. UNHCR has a way to give online. IRC has a way to give online. Give online. And secondly, I want you to take that smart device that we all use so much, and I want you to Google UNA Advocacy Agenda. And that will take you to electronic links to email your elected representatives on any of 14 topics, including fully funding the UN and supporting refugees. There are 12 others. Lastly, get involved in your local organizations, your local United Nations Association. At that same website, you'll find a membership link. So do join the cause, and please tell our elected representatives that people out here in California and around the country care. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. You know, these events come together over a period of months, and many of you have put on events, and you know that it takes a village. And you might think that these slides and the whole deal comes together just kind of like magic, and in my opinion, it does. Why? Because we have Ken Gruberman on our side. I want to put a special thank you out to Ken Gruberman, the Mac Daddy. If you need any Mac tech support or video assistance, Ken Gruberman, the Mac Daddy, is the guru of gurus. And I really thank you, Ken, for your several years of support of the Global Forum. Got it? Okay, good, good. So I started with a little bit of a poem from one of the winners of the poem contest in Canada. And I want to finish with another one. This was from Julianne Nye, age 17, a senior at Winston Churchill Secondary School in Burnaby, British Columbia. And she writes, it's an untitled piece. The lines are too sharp for our own good. The globe is separated by pencil marks, war lines, separation. The invisible lines trip the weak and block them, no matter how hard they pound on the glass wall that thicken with each strike. Help! We cannot escape or enter. We are between the lines of nowhere, but the lines are permeable. They are a beaver's dam that can be broken, that should be exposed and open to all humans. Together, bound as one, we can erase the non-existent strokes of war and fear. Submitted by a 17-year-old. So on that note, I really want to sincerely thank Elle and Geordie and Gillian and Nala and Hale and all of you for being with us today, for the difference that you're committed to making in the world. There's a lot of work to do. This is the 12th Global Forum. Hopefully we'll sit here at the 13th Global Forum and be able to acknowledge some real progress being made, that we'll see a few less people sleeping on the streets of our country, that we'll see people welcomed at the border rather than pushed away from the border. You know, I'm reminded that in 1938, a boatload of Jews coming from Europe was turned away in Havana, and that boat was then heading to Miami. And the people on that boat saw some shimmering lights of Miami, and then it was turned away from Miami. Over 450 of those 900 ended up dying in the Holocaust. And America decided at that time, never again. And those words have been forgotten because we're doing it right now on our own border. And so thank you for the work that you're doing. Let's all, whatever your faith, say a prayer or put out a good thought, do a meditation for the possibility of a world that works for everyone. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you.
On my way home from school one evening, I was violently beaten by 2 gang members. I managed to escape their grasp and fled. Days later, I received a threat: join them, or my family and I would be killed. I'll never forget the horrible journey through Mexico. The things I went through. But I'm here now, and I can't look back. Thousands of us crossed the desert into the United States from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. We left behind everyone we loved as we fled from gang conscription, forced prostitution, and even the promise of certain death. We lived our entire lives under the rule of gangs that the U.S. created. We've been forced to make a journey no child should ever have to make. And a real shot at asylum is our only chance of safety. We are here, and we need your help. The Refugee Children's Center is in desperate need of help to pay for the lawyers who can fight for these survivors. Please share this video and consider contributing to the center.